My name is Sophia Wright, and I was 31 the morning my father tried to sell a hotel my trust had owned for 18 years. I sat against the wall of a Chicago conference room while my parents praised my younger brother, the visionary president, who had supposedly turned their family property into a $70 million prize. To them, I was still the disappointing daughter earning an hourly wage at the front desk. They did not know I had inherited $50 million. They did not know I controlled the trust beneath the hotel. And they certainly did not know the buyer had spent 6 weeks negotiating with me through separate counsel. When the final documents arrived, the closing lawyer scanned the table and said, "Will the legal owner please sign?" My brother reached for the pen. The lawyer covered it with one hand. I rose from my chair and picked it up instead. "Put that down," Dad shouted. The lawyer did not even look at him. "Mr. Wright, your daughter is the sole acting trustee and the only person in this room authorized to sell this hotel." My mother's face drained of color. My brother's jaw froze halfway through a smile. Dad stared at me as if the woman he had dismissed for years had been replaced by a stranger. I had not come to steal their sale. I had come to decide whether it would happen, and what their years of contempt would cost them before I signed. Before I tell you what I required, and what happened after I finally touched pen to paper, tell me what time it is where you are, and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story travels. 11 weeks before the closing, I stood behind the Lakehurst Hotel's reception desk while my mother told a room full of brokers that I was not part of the family presentation. My parents had managed the 214-room Chicago landmark for 26 years through Wright Hospitality Group. They called it our hotel so often that even they had stopped hearing the lie inside the phrase. That afternoon, they hosted potential buyers in the ballroom. I changed out of my guest services uniform, believing I had been invited as their daughter. My mother intercepted me and pressed a catering jacket into my hands. "The investors think this is a serious family company," Patricia whispered. "Help the servers. At least then you'll look useful." Behind her, my father, Robert, rehearsed numbers with my brother, Alexander, whom he had made president 6 months earlier despite Alexander never managing a full hotel budget. I looked at the jacket, then at my mother. "You asked me to come as family. Do not make this emotional," she said. "Your brother is trying to protect all of us." Alexander walked by wearing a new watch with a blue ceramic bezel. I recognized it from an invoice that had crossed my real desk 3 days earlier, $84,600, charged to the hotel management company as Executive Client Development. He noticed me looking and pulled back his cuff just enough to display it. "Good turnout," he said. "Try not to drop anything near the buyer." I put on the jacket. Not because my mother had won, but because the trust's compliance lawyer had advised me not to reveal my position until we finished tracing the company's expenses. For the next 2 hours, I carried water through conversations about a property everyone in the room assumed belonged to the people holding the microphones. I heard my father call Alexander the future of the Lakehurst. I heard my mother tell a broker that their older daughter never developed commercial instincts. Then Alexander raised a glass beneath the chandelier and announced that the hotel would enter its greatest chapter under his leadership. When a family can turn its own daughter into a prop for its image, does it still see her as a person? The question took me back 7 years, to the morning my grandmother's attorney gave me a sealed letter and a gray binder. I was 24. Eleanor had left me approximately $50 million in investments and commercial property, none of it in my parents' names. A second instrument, the Eleanor Wright Legacy Trust, held title to the Lakehurst under a corporate trustee until I turned 30. Then I could become sole acting trustee and direct any sale, refinancing, or change of operator. Her letter contained no instructions to punish anyone. It contained a warning. Your parents admire the appearance of ownership more than the duty that comes with it. Do not reveal what you hold until you know whether they value you without it. I kept the inheritance secret. I rented a modest apartment in a building I owned, drove a used Honda, and accepted a guest services position at the Lakehurst. The job was real. I checked in guests, handled complaints, and learned more about the hotel in 18 months than Alexander had learned from a lifetime of calling it his. A small professional team managed my investments under the unremarkable name Harbor Ridge Capital. My family never asked how I filled the rest of my time. When I turned 30 and accepted trusteeship, I reviewed the Lakehurst's books. The trust owned the land, building, furniture, trademarks, and liquor license holding entity. Wright Hospitality merely operated the property under a management agreement my grandmother had signed decades earlier. That agreement forbade undisclosed related party spending, personal use of hotel funds, and borrowing against management fees without notice. It also allowed the trust to terminate for cause. By the night of the broker reception, I had found more than a watch. Alexander had billed luxury car leases as transportation partnerships, club dues as market research, and private weekends as corporate retreats. My parents had approved enough of it to keep him looking successful, while the management company accumulated $16.8 million in loans and guarantees. They had not built equity in the Lakehurst, they had built debt around the right to manage it. After the last broker left, my father handed me $200. For helping, he said. More than you would have made at the desk. I counted $200, placed it beside his champagne glass, and walked out. In the elevator, I removed the catering jacket and called my trust attorney. Open a formal audit, I said, and accept the buyer meetings. Do not disclose my name yet. The doors closed on the ballroom floor. For the first time, I was no longer merely watching them spend what they did not own. 6 months before the closing, a lender had refused to extend Wright Hospitality's $6.2 million credit line unless the company reduced debt and produced audited financials. Instead of cutting expenses, Robert hired a broker to market the Lakehurst. He claimed the family controlled the property and all associated operating rights, language vague enough for a sales memorandum and bold enough to attract buyers. Meridian Crown Hotels offered $70 million for the real estate, hotel assets, brand rights, and clean termination of the management contract. My mother began discussing a Palm Beach condominium. Robert promised friends he would start an investment fund. Alexander ordered renderings for a headquarters his company would never occupy. They planned as though the entire price would reach their account. They knew an Eleanor Wright entity appeared on the deed, but Robert dismissed it as estate paperwork. For years, a bank trust department had approved ordinary capital budgets. My parents assumed the bank would sign their sale. They did not know its authority ended on my 30th birthday. The public trust certificate named no beneficiary, and no transaction had yet required my successor certificate. Meridian's title search found the trust, and its counsel contacted me through the registered attorney. I did not sabotage the offer. The Lakehurst needed $22 million in modernization, and Meridian could preserve it. I accepted the valuation if the buyer retained staff, honored reservations, and separated the hotel from my family's debt. For 6 weeks, I negotiated under a confidentiality agreement. Meridian knew the owner. My parents knew only that the trust side wanted more diligence. 9 days before closing, Alexander summoned department heads to the ballroom. I stood near the back with the housekeeping director and chief engineer, while he unveiled a slide titled, "The Wright Legacy Continues." His own portrait filled half the screen. He announced that Meridian had asked him to remain as regional president after the acquisition. Meridian had made no such offer. The next slide credited him with raising occupancy by 12%. The actual increase came from a pricing model developed by 2 revenue managers he had excluded from the meeting. When I asked, "Has Meridian approved that announcement?" he stared at me as if a chair had spoken. "Front desk questions go through your supervisor," he said. Several managers looked down. My father, seated in the first row, smiled. Afterward, Alexander caught me beside the service corridor. "You are coming to the closing," he said. "Mom wants one family photograph before we stop pretending your job is part of the success story." "Why would you want me there?" "Perspective. You should see what ambition looks like when it pays off. He lowered his voice. And do not tell anyone you are my sister until after the photographs. Meridian thinks our leadership bench is strong. That evening, my mother arrived without calling. She inspected my second-hand sofa and stack of hotel uniforms, seeing the life she expected. She missed the original sketch from Eleanor and the building reports addressed to my holding company. Patricia gave me a gray dress for closing, then handed me a confidentiality agreement prohibiting discussion of the sale or hotel information, with a $500,000 penalty. Your attorney expects an hourly employee to sign this without counsel? I asked. It is protection for your brother. People get jealous when someone succeeds. She softened her voice. After the sale, your father and I may be able to help you. Perhaps pay a year of your rent. But you need to stop being difficult. I turned to the signature page. The agreement identified Wright Hospitality Group as beneficial owner of the Lakehurst Hotel. That false phrase mattered. I slid the document back into the envelope. I will have someone review it. Her expression hardened. Sophia, this family is about to complete the largest hotel sale in Chicago this year. Do not embarrass us because you feel left behind. The words landed differently than the insults of my childhood. They did not wound the poor daughter they imagined. They warned the trustee responsible for hundreds of employees and a $70 million asset. After she left, I sent the agreement to my audit counsel. Within an hour, she identified the same ownership representation in 2 lender presentations and an industry award application Alexander had submitted under his own name. The next morning, auditors reported $842,000 in personal expenses and unsupported consulting payments directed by Alexander and approved by Robert. Patricia had signed guarantees secured by their house and accounts. The company had breached 3 loan covenants, giving the trust grounds to terminate. I could have ended the sale. Instead, I authorized closing and ordered 2 document sets. The first completed the transaction with staff protections. The second terminated Wright Hospitality for cause, released the audit to lenders, and exposed every guarantee. My family would choose after learning who had sat behind the front desk. 2 days before closing, Robert called me into his office. He did not offer me a chair. At the meeting, speak only if someone addresses you, he said. You are there because your mother insists. This is Alexander's moment. On his desk, my brother's photograph sat beneath the words, President, Owner, Visionary. Nothing honored the staff who kept the hotel operating, and nothing suggested my father understood the title report waiting downtown. Understood, I said. As I left, he added, when the money clears, we will decide what is fair for you. I did not turn around. They thought I was attending to receive whatever kindness remained after their victory. I was attending to determine whether they left with a settlement or a stack of default notices. The closing occupied a glass conference room overlooking the Chicago River. Meridian's team sat opposite my parents, Alexander, their broker, and 2 attorneys. I arrived in the gray dress with a slim black folder. Robert pointed to a chair against the wall. Family observers sit there, he said. Alexander leaned toward Meridian's acquisition director. My sister works guest services. She wanted to watch a real transaction. The director glanced at me, then at the counsel beside her. Both already knew who I was. Neither corrected him. For 40 minutes, lawyers moved through payoff statements and transfer schedules. Robert spoke about preserving his legacy, although the agreement gave him no role. Alexander twice asked about his regional appointment. The acquisition director answered, all appointments will be addressed after ownership documents are executed. He heard possibility where she offered none. My mother texted me from across the room, sit straight, try to look happy for him. At 10:17, Meridian's closing counsel Daniel Cho placed a blue-tabbed signature packet at the center of the table. Before we release funds, we need the deed, assignment of hotel assets, and owner's closing certificate. Will the legal owner please sign? Alexander reached for the silver pen beside the packet. Daniel placed 2 fingers over it. Not you, Mr. Wright. My father frowned. The ownership documents are being signed by the family company. The family company owns no real estate or hotel assets, Daniel said. It is the outgoing manager. The room went silent. I stood, crossed the carpet, and picked up the pen. Put that down, Robert shouted. His chair struck the wall behind him. Daniel did not raise his voice. Mr. Wright, your daughter is not touching your documents. She is executing the owner's consent. The Eleanor Wright Legacy Trust has held record title to the Lakehurst Hotel since 2008. Ms. Sophia Wright is its sole acting trustee and the only person in this room authorized to sell the hotel. My mother's face drained of color so quickly that her broker pushed a glass of water toward her. Alexander's jaw froze. He looked from me to the packet and then to Meridian's attorneys, searching for someone willing to turn the sentence into a joke. She works at the front desk, he said. She chose to work at the front desk, Meridian's acquisition director replied. We have been negotiating with Ms. Wright's counsel for 6 weeks. Robert snatched the title summary. It named the trust as fee owner and me as trustee. His attorney whispered that the documents were valid. My father read my name 3 times. Eleanor left you the hotel? Patricia asked. She placed it in trust years before she died, I said. You were managers. You were paid management fees. You were never owners. Alexander stood. This is some technical structure. Dad built this place. I am president. I opened my black folder and laid his employment agreement beside the title report. You are president of Wright Hospitality Group, an operator in default under its management contract. You have no equity in the property, the furniture, the brand, or the sale proceeds. Sit down, Robert said to me, attempting to recover the tone that had controlled our family for years. We will resolve this privately. Daniel, pause the closing. Meridian's acquisition director folded her hands. We will pause for 30 minutes, but to be clear, Meridian does business with the record owner. We relied on Ms. Wright's authority, not the titles used in your marketing materials. That sentence broke something in my father. His identity rested on rooms believing he owned whatever stood behind him. A buyer had separated the building from the man in one breath. Robert turned on his attorney. Why was I not told? You were told that trust consent was required, she answered carefully. You instructed us that the bank trustee would provide it. The bank has not been trustee for more than a year. My mother stared at me. You knew we were selling. I knew you were trying. And you let us plan our lives around it? I removed a second packet. You planned your lives around money that was never yours. I let the buyer complete due diligence while I investigated what your company did with hotel funds. Alexander's eyes dropped to the audit tab. That is private company information. The trust's management agreement gives it inspection rights. Your own signature is on the amendment. I opened to a schedule of charges. The watch, luxury car leases, private travel, club expenses, and consulting payments to an entity registered at his apartment. You classified $842,000 as hotel business expenses. The company's lenders relied on statements that omitted those related party payments. That is no longer merely a family issue. My mother began crying. I remembered the catering jacket, my father's $200, and Alexander telling me to watch ambition pay off. The memories did not make me cruel. They made me precise. Robert lowered himself into his chair. What do you want? I placed 2 folders in front of him, one white and one red. The white folder completes the $70 million sale. Meridian retains every employee in good standing, funds the renovation plan, and recognizes the trust as seller. Wright Hospitality gives up its management contract and receives a limited transition payment, paid directly to its secured creditors. Harbor Ridge Capital restructures the remaining guaranteed debt under strict conditions. I touch the red folder. This terminates your company for cause today. Meridian walks away. The audit goes to every lender entitled to it. The trust pursues repayment of misused funds, and the creditors enforce the house, accounts, and personal guarantees under their existing rights. Alexander pushed the white folder away. You set us up. I did not approve your expenses. I did not sign your guarantees. I did not describe you as an owner on lender presentations. Robert looked toward Meridian's team. Give us the room. The acquisition director stood. Before leaving, she looked at him and said, 30 minutes. After that, our offer expires. When the door closed, my father looked at me with open hatred. I had imagined this revelation and expected to feel enormous. Instead, I felt a lock turn. Their power had depended on my agreement that they could define me. I no longer agreed. Read the conditions, I said. Then decide how expensive your pride is. The first condition ended the fiction immediately. Robert and Patricia would resign as officers of Right Hospitality at closing. Alexander would resign as president, waive severance, surrender access to every hotel system, and sign a corrected public statement confirming that he had served only as president of the management company and had never held ownership in the Lakehurst. Meridian required the correction because his award applications and press interviews had repeatedly described him as the hotel's owner. You want me to humiliate myself online? Alexander said. I want the public record to match the legal record, I replied. You created the difference. The second condition converted luxury into repayment. The transition payment would go directly to lenders. The Porsche, 2 leased vehicles, pledged jewelry, and country club deposit would be surrendered under existing security agreements. Their mansion would be listed within 14 days, with proceeds applied to the guaranteed balance. They could keep protected accounts and enough for a reasonable move. I would not leave them without shelter, but I would not let them protect appearances while vendors carried losses. Patricia wiped her face. My jewelry came from your father. Most of it was pledged to secure the line that paid company expenses, I said. You signed the collateral schedule. She looked at Robert. He did not meet her eyes. For the first time, the symbols she used to prove her status became evidence of the decisions he had hidden from her and the guarantees she had signed without reading. The third condition required Alexander to acknowledge the $842,000 in unsupported charges and enter a 5-year repayment agreement. The final audit would go to lenders and tax counsel. I could not control whether regulators asked questions, but I would forgo a separate civil claim if he disclosed everything, cooperated, and paid. One lie would end that protection. I cannot repay that, he said. Then you should not have spent it. The fourth condition placed remaining guarantees under an independent administrator for 5 years. My parents would disclose finances, seek approval for new secured debt, and live on actual income. Harbor Ridge would extend the term and reduce interest, but not forgive principal. Robert flipped to the signature page and laughed once, without humor. Harbor Ridge, that is you too. It is my investment company. So you bought our debt while pretending to earn wages downstairs. I bought the senior loan after a documented default. An independent committee priced it, the trust did not fund it, and I recused myself from the sale allocation. Revenge without boundaries becomes another form of entitlement. You had notice before Harbor Ridge acquired anything. He scanned the papers, searching for a weakness. You expect us to call you for permission every time we spend money? No, the administrator is not me. You wanted a business solution, so you are receiving one. My mother moved her chair closer to mine. Sophia, end the trust arrangement. Call the hotel a family gift. We can sign privately, divide the sale, and put this behind us. Your grandmother would not want strangers to see us like this. I almost admired the speed with which she tried to convert my inheritance into a duty to protect her. Grandmother created the trust because she knew exactly how you handled money. Calling the hotel a gift would be false, and dividing trust assets for your comfort would violate my duty. We are your parents. That gave you a chance to know me. It did not give you title. Robert said they had paid for my childhood and education. I reminded him that scholarships and loans covered most of my tuition while he funded Alexander's ventures. He said my brother had greater potential. Even in defeat, he reached for the same hierarchy. I slid the red folder closer to him. Then choose him again. Reject the restructuring, protect his title, and let the creditors apply the documents you signed. Alexander stopped arguing when his lawyer summarized the alternative: termination, foreclosure, enforcement of the guarantees, and a civil claim that could follow him for years. The white folder was not mercy. It was the narrowest route through consequences they had created. At 10:46, Meridian's team returned. Robert asked for 5 more minutes. The acquisition director looked at me. I shook my head. "We accept," my father said. The signatures began with resignations. Patricia's hand trembled over the jewelry surrender. Robert pressed so hard on the debt modification that the pen tore the page. Alexander stared at the corrected statement. He had led the management company, the trust had owned the hotel, and he would hold no role after transition. Nothing insulted him. The truth was enough. "Once this posts, nobody in the industry will take me seriously," he said. "The staff had to take you seriously while you charged a watch to their workplace," I replied. "Sign it." He did. Daniel returned the sale packet. I read the employee retention clause, renovation covenant, and proceeds schedule once more. The trust would receive $66 million after adjustments. $4 million would fund creditor and transition obligations. My parents would receive no windfall. Their company left with less debt, not wealth. I looked at each of them before lowering the pen. Alexander's anger had collapsed into disbelief. My mother seemed smaller without the future she had already spent in her imagination. My father watched my hand, finally understanding that the daughter he had seated against the wall controlled whether everyone at the table left with a completed deal. I signed. Meridian's counsel confirmed the wire and distributed the closing certificates. At 11:08, the Lakehurst changed hands. At 11:12, Meridian released its public announcement. It thanked the Eleanor Wright Legacy Trust, identified me as trustee, praised the hotel's employees, and named a veteran general manager to lead the transition. Robert appeared nowhere. Patricia appeared nowhere. Alexander's corrected statement was linked beneath the announcement. His phone vibrated before we left. A trade publication withdrew the profile, calling him a second-generation owner. The Hospitality Association began reviewing the leadership award he had obtained with inaccurate materials. He looked at me as if I had pressed every button myself. I had not. I had simply stopped standing between his claims and the record. Within 10 days, the Lakehurst held a staff meeting in the ballroom where my family had made me carry water. Meridian retained 193 employees, restored maintenance funding, and promoted the 2 revenue managers whose work Alexander had claimed. I thanked the staff and explained the trust's retention agreement. I never mentioned my family. Their names had vanished from the organizational chart behind me. The audit fixed Alexander's unsupported spending at $917,400. He avoided a separate civil suit by disclosing accounts and beginning repayment, but the Hospitality Association revoked his award. Meridian rejected him. 2 interview offers disappeared, and friends stopped answering when he could no longer offer suites or introductions. He accepted an operations job with a commercial laundry supplier. Honest work, without an expense account or impressive title. My parents sold the mansion after 2 price reductions. The proceeds, vehicles, club deposit, and pledged valuables reduced their guarantees, but did not erase them. They moved into a rented 2-bedroom condominium in Evanston and attended quarterly meetings with the independent administrator. Patricia told acquaintances they were simplifying. Most understood. Invitations that had once arrived weekly slowed to almost none. The humiliation they feared was not a public mob. It was the quiet discovery that many relationships had been attached to a building they never owned. 6 months after closing, they asked to meet at a small coffee shop near my office. I arrived first and chose a table away from the window. Robert wore a suit, but no tie. Patricia carried a simple leather bag. Alexander came directly from work in a company polo shirt. None of them looked destroyed. That mattered to me. Consequences had reduced their choices. They had not removed their ability to build new lives. Robert asked whether I would forgive half the remaining guarantee because they had complied for 2 quarters. Alexander wanted me to write a letter saying the audit had found no intentional misconduct, although it had made no such conclusion. Patricia wanted the corrected ownership statement removed from the sale announcement because it appeared in searches for his name. I listened until they finished. Then I told Robert that the modification already gave them a lower rate and more time than the original lenders required. I told Alexander I could truthfully confirm that he had made 6 payments and cooperated after closing. I would not certify an intention I could not know. I told Patricia that accurate public records were not punishment simply because they were uncomfortable. "So this is forever?" she asked. "You will always see us as people who used you?" I rested my hands around the coffee cup. "I still see you as my parents, but I am no longer the tool you use to protect your image. Trust will not return because you completed 6 months of a 5-year agreement. If it returns, it will be built from what you do when there is nothing left to gain from me." Robert looked down. For once, he did not tell me that Alexander's future mattered more. My brother said quietly that he had never known the names of the revenue managers whose work he took. He had written to both of them. One had answered with 2 sentences, the other had not answered at all. I believed his shame. I did not confuse shame with repair. When the people who once dismissed you begin asking for mercy, do you have the courage to keep your boundaries without becoming cruel? I paid for my coffee only. Outside, my mother called after me. "Are you ever coming to dinner again? Invite me without needing money, a signature, or a photograph," I said. "Then I will decide." 3 weeks later, an invitation arrived for a Sunday meal in their condominium. There was no dress code, no guest list, and no request hidden inside it. I went for 1 hour. The food was ordinary. The conversation was awkward. It was not reconciliation, but it was the first family gathering I could remember where nobody introduced Alexander by a title or asked me to disappear. 18 months after the sale, I stood on a stage at a national hospitality governance conference. Meridian had nominated me to speak about legacy assets, responsible ownership, and why invisible employees often understand a business better than the people claiming credit for it. My parents were not in the audience. Alexander watched the recording later from his apartment. I never used their names. I described a hotel whose managers had confused access with ownership and status with competence. Then I said, "Sometimes people recognize your value only after you stop asking for their recognition." The room became quiet in the way the closing room had been quiet, but this silence did not erase me. It made space for my voice. The Lakehurst reopened after its first renovation phase, with the original staff memorial wall preserved. Near the lobby, Meridian installed a small plaque honoring Eleanor Wright's years of stewardship and the employee retention commitment attached to the sale. I asked that my own name remain in the legal archive, not above the entrance. I had spent too long watching my family turn buildings into monuments to themselves. I did not need another monument. Robert and Patricia continued making payments and living within the plan. Alexander completed his first full year at the supplier without charging a personal expense to anyone else. Our relationship remained limited, but honest enough to breathe. Forgiveness, I learned, was not returning the keys to people who had misused them. It was releasing the need to watch them suffer while keeping the locks that protected my life. My grandmother's $50 million gave me choices. The trust gave me authority. Neither gave me worth. I had possessed that before the inheritance, before the closing, and even behind the front desk while my family called me a failure. Have you ever been judged by relatives because your life did not look successful enough from the outside? Share a short version of your story in the comments. I read them all.
Thank you for watching this story until the very end. This video is completely fictional and created only for entertainment, education, and dramatic reflection. We hope to see that when people twist the truth to protect themselves, you do not have to spend your life proving that what happened. Your peace can begin when you stop trying to win honesty from people who are committed to the no.